There has been a ton of new information coming out about Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced as we build momentum to the launch of this game. And I feel like Ubisoft has attached a lot more to this release than any other remake so far. Now, on the surface, that's what it looks like. They're bringing back one of the most beloved Assassin's Creed games ever made. We can all agree on that. Updating the visuals, modernizing systems, letting people experience Edward Kenway's story once again. When you start looking at the timing, the amount of resources that are going into this project, even the messaging Ubisoft is using and some of the changes they are making, it starts to feel like this game is carrying some pressure. Welcome to the channel, everybody. Jimmy or Chaos. I read every single comment on every single video. Today, I'm going to get you updated on everything for AC Black Flag Resynced. Are you buying it? Are you into it? The changes we're going to talk about, are you okay with them? Are they just quality of life to you? Are they doing too much, too little? The controversy about changing characters, all of it. So you let me know by the end of the video. This isn't just Ubisoft revisiting a fan favorite. It feels to me like they're trying to prove something to players who have become increasingly skeptical of the company over the last several years, and that skepticism is definitely warranted. Now, the reason Black Flag is such an interesting choice is because it's one of the few Assassin's Creed games that seems to unite all of us. You can find endless arguments online about which AC game is the best. Some people swear Assassin's Creed 2, others think Brotherhood, some like the newer RPG style type games like me, like Odyssey, but Black Flag has always existed in this unique space where even people who aren't huge AC fans usually have some positive things to say. So for a lot of players, Black Flag wasn't just a good Assassin's Creed game, it was the best pirate game ever made. I agree with that. That's a huge distinction because it means Ubisoft isn't simply tapping into AC nostalgia here. They're tapping into nostalgia from an entirely different audience that fell in love with sailing the Caribbean. They fell in love with commanding the Jackdaw, hunting treasure, sea shanties, all of it. So that's why I think Ubisoft knows they can't really afford to simply remaster this and call it a day. You can't shove it out the door like that. If they were chasing nostalgia, they would have, I would assume, cleaned up the graphics, probably increased the frame rate, and they would have shipped it. Instead, everything we've heard so far suggests they're rebuilding all the major systems from the ground up. Movement's been updated, combat's been reworked, stealth is expanded, naval gameplay is going to get some attention, and of course, the visuals, they have taken a massive leap forward. This isn't being presented as a museum piece that players can revisit for a weekend. Ubisoft wants people to talk about Resynced the same way people talk about remakes like Resident Evil. So I'm down for that. Now, one of the biggest things that caught my attention is how much emphasis Ubisoft is placing on the player freedom in the terms of stealth. And we always have that argument about Assassin's Creed. The OG Assassin's Creed players love stealth, but then you get into the RPG ones like Origins and like Odyssey. Obviously, the stealth isn't a huge factor. So this is good for original Assassin's Creed players. When you go back and play some of the older AC games today, there are moments where you can definitely feel their age. Of course you can. They're old. Certain missions kind of feel restrictive. There's some of the stealth mechanics. They feel limited compared to what modern players expect. But then again, you have the whole, if you're making a remake, you don't want to take away from what made the legacy so good. You want to capture the magic, but you also want to update it for 2026 and quality of life, all that stuff. It's a very hard line to walk. Now, the addition of things like crouching anywhere, that might sound minor to some people. But that's one of those quality of life improvements that can fundamentally change how people approach their situations in this game. It's the difference between fighting the game and working with the game. And Ubisoft appears to understand that there's aspects of Black Flag that players remember fondly and aspects that I guess players tolerated because that's how games were designed back then. I mean, the challenge is figuring out which elements should stay untouched. Combat? That's probably where that challenge becomes the most difficult. If you played the original Black Flag, raise your hand if you did, you know how powerful Edward eventually became. Once you learn the rhythm of the combat, the entire groups of enemies, they kind of became little more than animation showcases. It looked awesome, but it wasn't demanding. Resynced appears to have been moving forward or toward a system that rewards timing, weapon variety, parries, adapting to enemy behavior, all those things. Sounds great on paper. But it's also where Ubisoft is taking one of its biggest risks, if you ask me. Whenever you make a game that's so beloved, there's always that fine line between improvement and overcorrection. Fans definitely want modernization, but they don't want the game to lose its identity in the process. Like I said, that legacy magic. And that is going to be one of the biggest debates surrounding this release, because what one player considers an improvement, another player might view as fixing something that was never broken in the first place. Now, another area where Ubisoft has a chance to surprise some people is the naval gameplay, because let's all be honest with each other, that's the reason many players fell in love with Black Flag in the first place. Edward was a great protagonist. The story, I think, was memorable, and the Assassin versus Templar conflict, I found it interesting. But when people talk about Black Flag years later, they always talk about the Jackdaw. They talk about spotting a ship off in the horizon, deciding whether to engage. You hear the crew break into the sea shanty, and it feels like you're captaining a pirate vessel across the Caribbean. It feels like Pirates of the Caribbean. And at the time, there wasn't anything quite like it. Even now, there aren't really any games that capture that feeling. I think that's why Ubisoft has to get this right. You got better water physics, improved weather systems, more detailed ship damage, enhanced boarding actions, and hopefully a more living ocean that could elevate something that was already considered one of the strongest features in the original game to a whole new level. But I think the danger is that expectations, they're through the roof. This was back in 2013, right? Players have experienced modern open world games. They've seen what current hardware can do. So if Ubisoft wants Resynced to feel special, well, the Caribbean itself kind of has to feel like a character on its own. Well, I mean, it does. I mean, this project feels like a test. It does. For Ubisoft as a company, over the last several years, they've struggled to maintain the level of trust. Can we all agree on that? There's been delayed projects, canceled projects, mixed launches, strategies being changed. There's this growing perception among some fans that Ubisoft has lost sight of what made their original franchises special. Now, whether that's completely fair or not, doesn't matter. Perception is what matters. When people hear Ubisoft announcing something, the reaction isn't always excitement. First, it's skepticism. We want proof. We want to see gameplay. We want to see it with our own eyes. And that's exactly what we're doing here. I'm excited, but I'm tentative. I am. Then there's Edward himself. Maybe one of the most important reasons the remake even exists. Over time, Edward has become one of the most beloved protagonists in the entire franchise. And what's interesting is that he wasn't necessarily viewed that way after launch. Over the years, as more Assassin's Creed games are released, more players went back and they appreciated what Ubisoft created with Edward. He was not the perfect hero. He wasn't an assassin from the start. He was actually really selfish and ambitious, and he made a lot of terrible decisions. So you watched him grow into something more meaningful because of one of the strongest character arcs in the entire series. So yeah, if they're going to put modern graphics, improved facial animation, cinematic presentation, it could really bring Edward alive anymore. Now, we always have to talk about the questions that Ubisoft has not answered yet. And one of the biggest involves content. Are we getting everything from the original package? What happens with Freedom Cry? What happens with multiplayer? Does Ubisoft try to reintroduce some of these features, or are they going to focus entirely on the single-player experience? Those aren't small questions, because players remember. They remember different parts of Black Flag. They do, and they remember it differently. Some people cared about Edward's stories. Others spent countless hours in multiplayer, and others just wanted side content and wanted to explore the Caribbean. So when you make a classic, you have to have this balancing act between preserving what people loved and deciding what deserves resources in the modern release. And that multiplayer conversation is especially interesting because we've seen a growing appetite for unique multiplayer experiences. Assassin's Creed multiplayer was never the biggest mode in the game, but it was different. It had tension. It had some strategy. So do they capitalize on that? And then there's one more other thing I want to talk about. It's worth mentioning. Ubisoft isn't releasing this remake into the same world that Black Flag originally launched, right? Back then, open world games were different. Today, players have enormous expectations when it comes to exploration, side activities, the map, world interaction, all of it. The purpose of a remake should be to answer a simple question, if you ask me. Why should someone experience this version instead of the original? So if Ubisoft can answer that question, they may have something special. Now, at the end of the day, I think that's why a lot of people are watching this, me included. It's not because we love Black Flag, it's because we understand what success or failure could mean here. If Ubisoft gets this right, this could be one of the best examples of how a remake should be done into a modern classic. So let me know what you think. Are you buying it? Are you putting time in it? Are you sold? Also, the whole drama changing characters, the girl, and how she looks in her clothing and everything. I mean, people are going to argue about anything they can come up with, argue about. But is it really that big a deal? You let me know.